So for any of you who are not familiar with our scheduling process, this is the opportunity that we give ourselves to explore the concepts and the experiences, whatever is on your mind related to your Dharma practice, primarily, but anything you'd like to raise. We'll explore it. John?
I have a practical question about process or method, particularly dealing with sound, as today we had a lot of sound. So I'm just wondering, I've heard in the past one way is to drill into the sound, go right into the sound, but because sound is not like thought, which comes and goes. Sound stays, or sometimes it's erratic and periodic and jumping around. So it's really hard. We don't have any control over the sound, obviously. So I'm just curious if there's any special techniques for rising above or below, or ignoring sound, or dealing with sound. Anything you have on that?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure that sound is a special case. I mean, if I frown at you, that's pretty much the same thing. I mean, we're dealing with experiences that arise, and those experiences may be triggered from something external like sound, but they could also be triggered by a memory of something that happened 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago. So it's in a sense, it's just the same thing. Our experiences arise from the inherently pure mind itself, continuously, without a pause. And we would refer to many of those things as memories, but also many of them feel like they've never occurred before. And we generate more of them by talking to ourselves about what the experience was, which often leads us away from just the bare recognition of the experience that we're having. So sound, then we have sounds that have meaning, like hearing conversations that are going on. So those can be more difficult depending upon what the meaning is. If you hear two people talking and then you stop for a moment and you listen, you realize they're talking about you. It's like, that's a different thing to recognize. In one sense, maybe easier, maybe more difficult, but probably more difficult, whether it's positive or negative. These are the things that are actually the most important. The easy stuff is like, oh, there's water here. Well, I wish it was hot, or I wish it was cold, or I wish it was something else. Generally speaking, we don't get much energy from that. But if we're really carrying a load of anger about an encounter we had yesterday or last year or whatever it is, that has a lot of energy. And that energy, if we just recognize that experience that we're having and practice just having the recognition of it, which is a prerequisite to anything else that happens with it, we can get a lot of practice in there, in a way which feels to us authentically often like that was really good. So we can actually feel a sense of gratitude that we had that experience or have that experience, which goes back to the place of the instruction, which is actually maybe not always so helpful, to feel a sense of gratitude in difficult situations. Often we'll say, well, that's easy for you to say, but this person did this to me. So we can't quite we can't quite get there, but the instruction is so helpful when we actually feel that sense of gratitude, like we see through the experience we're having. And we recognize that the experience is our experience, no matter what the cause. Someone else didn't have it, I had it. And I recognized it as an experience, neither adding nor subtracting or altering any of it, just letting it, like the cloud. The cloud appears, the cloud disappears. We often say, the cloud doesn't go anywhere. When the sun comes out and the cloud disappears, it doesn't go anywhere. So in the same way, we have that experience with many of our experiences, is that they arise, they're there for a while, then they disappear. Some of them we're glad they disappear. Some of them we wish we could make them disappear. But they all disappear in the time when we stop feeding them anyway. So just the recognition brings about the end of that, which of course is always replaced by another experience. So in the course of practice, this is a fairly, I have to say, a fairly high level of practice to recognize your experience as it occurs and just pay attention to it without commentary, without judgment of any kind. And when it goes, it's just gone. No need to talk about that either. So with that in mind, we can also forgive ourselves some inadequacy of being able to do that, because it actually is very difficult to just recognize the experiences as they arise, even when they're not highly charged. What to speak of then when they're really charged? Is that okay? Just barely, right? Need some practice.
Okay, is this working? So hearing that discussion reminded me of an instruction that has been incredibly helpful for me, which is the one that says, be grateful to everyone, which can be really hard depending on who that is. But it's like with practice, you can sort of find a way to do it, and it's this incredible relief from suffering if you can.
Yeah. There's also parallel to the instruction that a very profound practice is to take every experience that arises as a gift from your teacher or your guru, that puts all experiences in a different category, because you feel like you have a relationship with that person with every experience that arises. Yeah. And that could also be, it's really the same thing, slightly different spin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to have this quality of you're no longer being helplessly buffeted around by experience or by relationship with a person or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, you're kind of free from that.
Kind of what?
Free from that feeling of like, I'm being buffeted around by what this person did or what this experience was.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm helpless and it's just beating me up, you know. You don't particularly feel helpless anymore, no matter what it is, you know.
But don't you love to be buffeted around?
I've learned a lot from that from time to time.
Thanks.
I note that, John, you didn't say what the problem was with sound, really.
Yeah.
Particularly in the context of the instruction to simply recognize experience as it arose. Can you put your finger on what you think the problem was? What were you thinking should be different than it was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say, well, one is just the pure sound is a distraction to something.
From what?
Right, that's the question. So I have this illusion that deep into meditation, there's sort of this emptiness, silence, void, but sound is bopping around, and so that's not true. That's not correct. I understand that, but that's a personal struggle to understand that. And then the other is just this other side of the question about other people, like how rude are they to make this noise at this time while we're trying to do this, you know? So there's that going on too. So you know, it's like those two things are spinning a little bit. But I'm not really thinking too much. I'm really just distracted, just continually distracted with the different sounds.
By the sound.
By the sound, yeah.
But the sound is your experience.
Yeah.
Right?
So if I understand.
So how could you
yeah.
be distracted then? From the perspective of this instruction,
Yeah.
of being present and recognizing your experience exactly as it unfolds, both the sound itself, the reaction to it, the self-recrimination about it, the wishing for strategies to do something about it, that's all a stream of experience. And so it is the gift from the Guru.
Yeah. I think, well, I understand it intellectually. Now I need to practice.
Yeah. Well, as Michael said, this is not, he didn't give this is not meditation 101 first day. This is challenging. And one of the main things that it challenges is the idea that, well, I thought meditation was supposed to be, and then ellipsis, and then we fill in the blanks with whatever we hoped for.
Smooth and still and blissful.
Yeah.
Yes. And I should be really good at that. And it should be really good to me.
That's right.
We should have a thing going, me and meditation.
I just wanted to speak to the two people who just spoke. I had a perfect experience yesterday to demonstrate the issue, which was that I was driving down Hawthorne. I was trying
Point the mic at your mouth. It'll work really good. Perfect. Is it on?
Now can you hear? Oh.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I was driving down Hawthorne yesterday, trying to get over 2 lanes, and I managed to finally get into the first lane over.
Yeah.
But I guess the guy in the big truck behind me wasn't so happy that I got in front of him, even though I had been signaling for quite some time. I wasn't asking permission. I was just letting him know I was coming over. So I got over there. And there was plenty of room, you know, between all the cars, but he did not like this little tiny old VW Golf getting in front of his brand new shiny new truck. So the next thing I knew, and I wasn't paying attention, I waved thanks to him. Maybe he thought I was waving something else, but I waved thanks, and then the next thing I knew, he was in the 1 lane over, and he quickly, and I just thought he needed to get over, but he cut in front of me in such a way that I almost crashed into his truck. And he was laughing. I mean, he was hanging out the window and laughing. And I have to say that for some reason, I actually thought to myself, oh, I feel sorry for him. And I didn't quite go to the point of feeling grateful yet. But I did actually prevent myself from doing what I would have otherwise done and said, you know, you effing asshole, whatever. I did not do that. I just realized, oh, this has happened, and he apparently was doing it to me, but I actually saw it as an opportunity, I think, to catch myself and look at him and wonder, you know, what was in him to make him feel compelled to do such a thing. And then I had to get over again, so I was behind him then. and then I was able to turn off, which is what I wanted to do. But so you know, I thought about it and my heart was racing because I felt like I was almost hurt. But it stayed with me for a little while, and then I think I really felt that I was able to see it in a more maybe generous way and to let go of it. It appeared in my dream last night. It wasn't it was his face, his sort of leering face appeared in the dream, and it woke me up. And my heart was racing again at that point. But I also, because I was able to wake up, I was able to think again more about what he might have been going through rather than feeling insulted or hurt, which normally I might have been. So it's a little tiny thing, and it doesn't happen very often, I have to admit, that I'm that generous about that kind of experience. But I'll take that as a step in the positive direction.
No real question, but I was kind of amused to see the different ways that I experienced the quote-unquote noise from outside and the noise from the little bodhisattvas in training on the lower level, and the attitudes that I was developing toward them. It was quite interesting to see the different ways I experienced it.
What was the last thing you said?
The different ways that I experienced those
see.
two things.
Yeah,
Oh, well, the kids, I love to hear the kids. I mean, that's not a distraction at all to me. That's little Buddhas up and coming, and I love that. And the outside, well, today I didn't get angry at him. Today I thought, I wonder if we could get him to meditate with us. And I thought, okay, it's just somebody doing his thing, and it's not him that's bothering me. It's the machine noise that's annoying, and you know, it really isn't bugging me the way it used to. It's okay. And, you know, maybe if I were really good, I could hear it as Chenrezig's mantra. But for now, the fact that it's not making me angry, that's okay, is a good thing.
I did not share Diane's love of the little voices. However, I got to uncover an irritation that I had going on with my body, which was sort of endless. And then I noticed that distraction, as we call it, was pretty much ongoing. When I would try to escape the external distractions, then came I give up. I can't deal with this. Well, it's ridiculous. It doesn't work. Another distraction. Which it seems like it's just an endless pile of distractions, and like trying to get into any space of recognition of this as the voice of the teacher is very difficult.
Very what?
Difficult. I can recognize that I'm deeply distracted, and it's one thing after another, and maybe I just have an extraordinarily busy mind and not enough meditation practice, but boy, it's ongoing. That's my total comment.
Well, I suspect that that I'm not so different from everybody else. And one of the discoveries that I've made about myself is that it's helpful to have a number of instructions on the practice of Shinei or anything else, a number of different approaches to it, so that on any given day, I'm likely to find one of them that is more helpful. And the longer that I try to work with a single approach, the more likely I am to just go deeper into distraction and all sorts of things that we would not necessarily identify as meditation. And so that's actually the intention of the instruction, to recognize what you're doing. So there's the word recognition is carefully chosen. That is to say, we're not trying to put our awareness on the irritation, not right off the bat, but we begin by just recognizing I'm irritated. And once we recognize that we're irritated, we've also connected to the energy that's there. We don't try to avoid things which have no energy. We just kind of like float through them. It's no big deal. I mean, there's sound in this room right now, continuous sound, if you listen, but we don't rise up and say it's too noisy. But in the moment that we see it, we can recognize it as something, and that's very helpful from a meditation standpoint, just to recognize, to develop the ability to recognize I have a little irritation now. The irritation provides me with a certain amount of energy that I wouldn't otherwise have. So that energy can be used to recognize and stabilize the recognition. And gradually, I like the cloud metaphor, where clouds pass over in the sky on a regular basis, and often they obscure something, like a full moon on a night. When there are clouds moving, we can have the sense that the moon has been obscured by the clouds. But in a short time, the clouds will either vanish or they'll move on. But the metaphor that we use for that is that the clouds vanish. They appear, they're there for a while, then they disappear. The reason why the distinction is important is because what we want to have is the view that the clouds do not go anywhere. When they vanish, they don't go anywhere, but they also do not stay. They don't go anywhere and they don't stay. So that's a helpful view to hold, because we know that actually there's nothing that is really coming and going. If my irritation comes, it's just some irritation. It doesn't bring with it any insight. It doesn't bring with it any grief. The grief all comes by our reaction. Our irritation all comes by our reaction. The sound doesn't bring us irritation. The sound is just sound. So when we recognize the irritation and it's connected at the same time with the sound, we can have an insight there that we otherwise wouldn't have. So it's just a very simple little practice. Recognize your experience. So it doesn't say recognize your anger. Whatever the experience is, like, I want to get out of here, I'm tired of being here, that's a concept. But there's an experience that's behind it, of agitation, of irritation of some kind. Without calling it any names, we can recognize the experience. And that's very helpful, just to be able to recognize it, not to name it, not to change it, not to put it somewhere else or increase it, just to recognize it. Helpful now in this very simple instruction, and helpful later in more complex practices also. We'll dedicate the merit of our efforts by this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you all. And there'll be a session this evening for anyone who's interested.